Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday, October 13th, 2025. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Radio Free Mormon and Rebecca Biblioteca. How are the two of you this evening?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
I am what I am, and it's all what I am.
Yeah. A little Popeye there. Folks, we've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to jump right into it. I'm going to put up on the screen our news slides. Top stories tonight: Mormon doctor charged with sex abuse. President Nelson's, by the way, that'll be brought to us by RFM. President Nelson's funeral and succession process after, of course, the loss of President Nelson. I'll be covering that. Deseret book removes book after public outcry. That's Rebecca Biblioteca. Then I believe Radio Free Mormon is giving us a story on Tim Ballard, if I'm not mistaken.
He's making headlines again. You can't keep a good man down.
No, you can't.
Or Tim Ballard.
No, that's right. And Rebecca's bringing us some temple updates and some information on the family proclamation. And we'll be concluding with a story from Rebecca. Is the LDS Church and maybe some of its entities that its subsidiaries, maybe they're abandoning Orthodoxy. So we'll get into that tonight. But we'll start off with our lead story about a Mormon doctor accused of sexually abusing patients. RFM.
Yes, this story has been a long time in the making. It has been making headlines nationally and locally in Oregon for years now. And the remarkable thing, and the news here, is that this individual, this doctor, this retired doctor, is now facing criminal charges for the first time. There has been a civil lawsuit that's been filed against him, but not criminal charges until this past week. So that is the news here. Mormon doctor accused of sexually abusing patients pleads not guilty to 11 charges is the headline. David Farley, that's the name of the doctor. David Farley appeared in court. Really, I should not call him doctor anymore because he has specifically been kicked out of the medical profession because of prior conduct that's contained in this story as well. So I'll stick with David Farley, then former doctor, ex-doctor. He appeared in court Friday, this past, 5 years after his patients first reported his abuse to the police. This story by Holly Bartholomew of the OPB, October 10th, 2025. Warning, this story contains details on sexual abuse allegations, including charges of crimes involving children. If you or someone you know may be a victim of sexual abuse, confidential support, information, and advice are available at the National Sexual Assault Hotline by calling 800-656-4673. That's 800-656-4673. Text chat is also available online. Here is a news story covering this case. Now, I actually went to two different video news stories because they each have something that the other does not. The first one will be playing at the beginning of the story. The second one at the end of this story. Hey, Bill. Can't hear it. I can't hear you either, so I guess at least
I can't hear the clip or Bill.
Well, let's get this to work. So,
I'm sorry I waited so long. I went like this to the ear, and you were kind of smiling, so I thought you were getting what I was indicating. But then you didn't.
Doing something funny for the last week where it has to be on something it shouldn't need to be on in order to play audio. So give me a moment here. Let's try this.
Okay.
More than 100 women
Is that
and
working?
children, all former patients of Farley, have.
Can you make it louder?
Well, disgraced Westland doctor David Farley in court today, pleading not guilty to 11 counts of sex abuse. The case brought by the Oregon DOJ after the Clackamas County District Attorney failed to secure charges back in 2022. More than 100 women and children, all former patients of Farley, have sued him and accused him of sexually abusing them under the guise of medical care.
K2's Christina Giardinelli is live now outside the Clackamas County Courthouse with an update. Christina, those charges do not include all the alleged victims in the lawsuit.
Right, they do not. They only have 3 victims right now in the charging document, but that, of course, could change as this case moves along. Another thing that could change is that the plaintiffs that you mentioned in that lawsuit could get called in this case as witnesses, and that's part of the reason why they're not talking to media right now. But I can tell you there was a lot of emotion in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom, hugs and tears outside of the courtroom here. In court today, Farley's bail was set at $500,000. The judge will allow him to return to Utah, where he currently lives, but he did waive his right to extradition, which means he will be coming back to Oregon to face the charges. Here's what the judge had to say about the release conditions today.
If the defendant were to post bail, I'm ordering that he go on intensive conditions of pretrial supervision, including those conditions applicable to charges of sex offense, which include no contact with the alleged victims.
Now, alleged victims have been critical of Clackamas County District Attorney John Wentworth's handling of the case in 2022. A press release sent by Oregon Department of Justice just moments ago includes the following statements from Wentworth. The former patients had developed trust with the DOJ and placed their confidence in its review. I have dedicated my entire career to victim advocacy and the pursuit of justice, it reads in part. After the grand jury declined to indict Farley in 2022, Wentworth asked the Oregon DOJ to review the case, that review resulting in yesterday's indictment. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield and Wentworth both declined to talk to us. Rayfield also sent a written statement that reads in part, when someone in a position of authority uses that position to harm others, it strikes at the core of who we are as a community. We owe it to survivors to follow the facts wherever they lead and ensure that no one is above the law. Now, Farley's trial is scheduled for December 3rd at 9 a.m. We'll continue to follow this case and bring you the latest. For now, live in Oregon City, Christina Giardinelli, K2 News.
Christina, thank you for that. There's a brand new program in Multnomah County aiming to give money to sex traffickers.
Yeah, I think that's it. So there is that story. And as you can tell, there's this side story about the Clackamas County prosecutor and the investigators in the case, at least some of them. And there's been a lot of complaining about how they've handled it, allegations of negligence, incompetence. And I haven't looked at that really closely. I've looked at it a little bit. And the reason I've looked at it a little bit is because a lot of times, you know, if someone, like, not everybody, but sometimes people, if things don't go their way in court or a prosecutor doesn't file charges, then the prosecutor becomes, you know, corrupt or incompetent, or the prosecutor or the investigators were incompetent. It looks like there may be something to these allegations. It's all I'm saying. In this case, there may be something to it. And so what happened is that the Oregon Department of Justice, right, the federal prosecutor, elected to bring charges himself and was able to secure an indictment from a grand jury on these counts, these 11 counts. Whereas the prosecutor, the county prosecutor in Clackamas County, was not able to do so. Apparently, he did take it in front of a grand jury, but they did not return an indictment, even one, in that situation. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'll continue here. 5 years ago, 4 women, these are 3 of them in the picture, 4 women came forward with allegations of sexual abuse by West Lynn, which is the name of the city in Oregon, West Lynn doctor David Farley, former doctor. More than 150 women and girls would follow. That is stunning. More than 150 girls and women would follow with similar allegations as the first 4. On Friday, the longtime family physician was arraigned in Clackamas County Circuit Court on a raft of felony charges. Farley, 67, appeared virtually from Clackamas County Jail after turning himself in earlier that day, which was arranged so that he did not have to spend the night in jail. You turn yourself in on the morning of the hearing so you can have the hearing and have bail set and bail out before the sun goes down. That's the idea there. The former doctor faces 11 felony charges for his conduct with 3 former patients. They include 4 counts of first-degree sex abuse, 5 counts of second-degree sexual abuse, 1 count of first-degree sexual penetration, and 1 count of second-degree sexual penetration. The Oregon Attorney General's office, which prosecuted the case, declined to say whether more charges would come. I would say which is prosecuting the case. Through his attorney, Jacob Howes, Farley pleaded not guilty. Clackamas County Circuit Court Judge Ann Leninger set bail at $500,000. Well, he's a retired doctor, so he could make that. The Oregon Department of Justice's involvement. For more than 3 decades, David Farley practiced medicine in Clackamas County at Providence's Willamette Falls Medical Center, Legacy's Meridian Park Hospital, and at his own practice, the West Lynn Family Health Clinic. These institutions and Farley are named in a nearly $1 billion lawsuit brought by 180 of his former patients. The doctor was also a prominent leader in the local Mormon church, where he allegedly met many of the patients who would later claim he abused them. In 2016, an Oregon teenager went to see her longtime family doctor, David Farley, for a physical before her missionary trip. Like the doctor, the teenager was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He allegedly convinced her that a penetrative pelvic exam was necessary at such an appointment, a line he frequently used even when evaluating elementary school-aged patients for a sports physical. 8 years later, the teenager, now in her 20s, saw on social media that David Farley had been accused of sexually abusing his patients by masking his actions as legitimate medical care. She is now one of more than 170 of Farley's former patients suing him and the hospitals and clinic where he worked. Her story detailed, by the way, Rebecca, I remember the first time I went over that slide, that part of the story, and your reaction, because you had a very visceral reaction to it. This idea about these girls going on missions, they got no idea. They don't know.
Yeah. And it reminds me of Dr. Broadbent, allegedly in Provo, who was a doctor that I considered seeing for, a premarital exam. Everybody went to him. This is the same kind of thing, word of mouth, trusted doctor, trusted church leader. And you have no idea what's appropriate and what's not, even if you're 19 years old, even if you're 22 years old, even if you're 25 years old, like I was when I went for my first, you don't know. And it's just devastating to think of someone taking advantage of a woman in that scenario. They don't know. They don't know what's appropriate.
Taking advantage of children in that scenario.
And children. Yep.
Her story, and we say her story, that's, the individual who was going on the mission and had that examination. Her story, detailed in the lawsuit, is echoed in the stories of other girls who grew up in the conservative LDS church. These patients say in the filing that they received little, if any, sexual education and did not know what to expect at a gynecological appointment or what kind of conduct to watch out for. Many met David Farley through the Wilsonville ward of the LDS church. where he was a stake high counselor, or were introduced to him by other friends at the church, as not only as a respected leader within the church, but a doctor with a degree from Harvard University. David Farley seemed inherently trustworthy. David Farley abruptly retired in August of 2020 and moved to Idaho. That same month, he surrendered his medical license to the Oregon Medical Board after the board found he engaged in sexual misconduct and took photos of the breasts and genitals of underage patients. So he was no longer a doctor as of 5 years ago in 2020. Later that fall, 4 women went to the West Lynn Police Department and reported Farley sexually abused them by masking his illegal and invasive conduct as legitimate medical care. In the months that followed, they would be joined by more than 150 other women and girls who reported they were sexually abused by Farley. And yet, when the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office convened a grand jury in 2022, hoping to bring charges against Farley, they came away with nothing. That was the grand jury that did not return an indictment in 2022. After the case, the patients widely criticized both the police and prosecutors who handled the investigation, saying the officers were incompetent and the prosecutors were dismissive of their stories. For 2 years, Clackamas County District Attorney John Wentworth staunchly defended his office's handling of the case, even suggesting in an op-ed in a local newspaper that the victims had lied by calling it a botched investigation. Wentworth and leaders at the West Lynn Police Department claimed they were hamstrung by Oregon law because it allows doctors to perform actions that would otherwise be considered sexual abuse if they occur in a medical setting. Farley's patients and their attorneys strongly pushed back on that claim, saying there was plenty of room within the law to secure charges. In December 2024, Wentworth changed his tune and asked then Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum to open a state-run criminal investigation of Farley. Rosenblum's office had been looking into the matter since 2022, when dozens of the victims asked her to take it on in the wake of the criminal case's failure at the local level. Prosecutors under Attorney General Dan Rayfield continued that work when he took office earlier this year. Friday's charges. So back in court last Friday, October 10th, 2025, the 11 charges against Farley stem from his alleged actions with 3 patients. According to the indictment, Farley faces 4 counts for his conduct with one of these patients that occurred in 2016. The indictment also alleges Farley committed 1 act of second-degree unlawful sexual penetration and 2 counts of first-degree sexual abuse against a girl under the age of 14 in 2009. Farley then sexually abused that patient again in 2011, according to prosecutors. The indictment alleges David Farley then committed 3 acts of second-degree sexual abuse against the 3rd patient on 3 separate occasions between 2019 and 2020. Friday's charges lend credence to what the former patients have said all along. The police and prosecutors involved in the initial criminal case failed in their mission to bring Farley to justice. When I was assaulted, I thought I was alone. I thought I had misread things, Katie Medley, one of the first to report abuse by Farley to police 5 years ago, said in a press release provided by the patient's attorneys. This is Katie Medley in the picture. My faith in our justice system was tried over the years, but my sister survivors and I never stopped speaking out, and now we have been vindicated. And here is this other clip from a different station, which focuses a little bit more on the victims.
And I'm just going to give a heads up. We might run into the same issue. I've been trying to get the sound to work the way it's supposed to. So let's try this.
Okay.
And if you let me know, I'll fix it immediately if this does not play.
It will be a grand experiment. No, I cannot hear him.
Okay. Super sorry, folks. My mixing board is not doing what it's supposed to do today, and it wasn't doing it last episode that RFM and I did as well. So,
Can you imagine?
let's try this.
Bill,
On this special edition of the 5 o'clock news, a former West Lynn doctor accused of sexually assaulting more than 100 women and girls, some younger than 14, has been arrested and is now facing criminal charges. Fox 12's Spencer Schott was in the courtroom today as the defendant faced a judge for the first time. Spencer?
Yeah, Pete, it was a packed courtroom this afternoon, full of people who say their lives were impacted by the former doctor, David Farley. Everyone declined to comment after today's hearing, but Farley is now facing 11 charges of sexual abuse and unlawful sexual penetration. 3 victims are named in these criminal filings, one of them being a minor. But now we've spoken to previous alleged victims who've spoken out against Farley in the past, and they say they've been waiting for these charges for years. Friday morning, David Farley turned himself in and was booked into the Clackamas County Jail.
Have a seat, sir. Please face the camera.
Then, Friday afternoon, he appeared virtually before a judge, where he pleaded not guilty.
Entered a plea of not guilty. Would like to address release. We've previously filed a motion for pretrial release.
Last year, 3 of Farley's alleged victims, who have a civil lawsuit against him, spoke to CNN about the abuse they say they faced while under the doctor's care.
He told me that he had a young patient die of cervical cancer. And so he wanted to check all his patients starting at a young age.
I remember laying there and thinking, what's going on? And then he hurt me. It hurt really bad. And it made my whole body jump.
After hearing Farley was arrested, they sent Fox 12 these statements. Nicole Snow said, "I'm extremely grateful to Attorney General Rosenblum and Rayfield and their team for hearing our pleas and working to bring Farley to justice." Lisa Pratt added, "This has been a very long road. The Attorney General and their team were kind, caring, and thorough. Their hard work got this dangerous predator off the streets." These criminal charges against Farley have been in the works for years. Back in 2022, a grand jury issued a not true bill, meaning there was not enough evidence for an indictment. But in 2024, Senate Bill 974 passed regarding sex abuse laws. And with that law on the books, the AG felt they got a second chance to prosecute. This time, a grand jury agreed there was enough evidence to go forward with the criminal charges. At the end of Friday's hearing, the judge set Farley's bail for $500,000 and instructed him not to contact any of the victims in this case. His trial is set to start on December 3rd. Now, on top of these criminal charges that were just filed today, Farley is also facing a civil lawsuit where more than 170 women allege that he sexually abused them. That case is also making its way through the courts. Reporting live from Clackamas County, Spencer Schott, Fox 12 Oregon.
5 on.
All right. So that is that story. Do you have any comments about that? I expect the first motion from the defense will have to do with whether this newly changed law in 2024 should be retroactive in nature. I don't know. I think the law is it has to explicitly state it's going to be retroactive for it to be retroactive. Generally, the rule is a law is not retroactive because it violates the ex post facto provision in the Constitution. No ex post facto laws. Well, there we go. Anyway, do you have any comments there?
I was just going to say that when it comes to these kinds of things where something happens one-on-one behind closed doors, to some degree, the former doctor has excuses that he can use to justify what's happening. I'm just amazed that in this world, the burden of proof often benefits the abuser. In other words, in lots of these cases, there can be numerous kinds of abuse or somebody can have instances where they're charged with rape or molestation, whatever it is. And there have been times where people seem to get away with things. I'm just glad that in this case, there's enough instances of things happening that at least the allegations have made their way into a courtroom and the charges are proceeding. You disagree with me, don't you?
Yes, but it's not worth going into at this point.
Okay.
I'll just say that the lines, for some reason,
It's not
get
about that.
blurry.
I'm displeased that he's charged. It's just that we have a certain system with certain burdens of proof in order to protect all of us, not just those who are under the gun, because any of us at any point could become under the gun ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. What I'm saying though is that I'm aware of instances where people were sexually abused, but because it's a he said, she said, the abuser often has the ability to get out of it because there isn't anything that crosses the burden of proof. So the county, the prosecutor, and law enforcement, and what they tend to just drop these things sometimes when it's just a one-time, a one-off, and it is a he said, she said. And in this instance, there are numerous people, and there was enough there for the allegations to make their way into a courtroom with charges.
Well, I will tell you, I mean, in defense of my home state, Washington, that at least for decades now, there's been a law in the books that police are not allowed to simply dismiss, ignore, or not act upon allegations of domestic violence. They have to first off determine who the primary aggressor was, and then they got to put the habeas corpus on that person and take him to jail.
Yeah, and then it's up to the county prosecutor at that point.
Well, if it's an assault for, which frequently is, they can be charged by the police. Yeah, that it puts the charge in front of the prosecutor. Yeah, exactly. Prosecutor's got to handle it.
Sorry.
Okay, so there's something else going on down about a stone's throw south from me in a little town called Everett. It's not that little anymore. It's in a neighboring county to me, and there's a heck of a lawsuit that's going on there. And Rebecca did a brief little video. I don't know, is that a short?
It's a short. There's so much news that I can't just wait till the newscast. So I put about 3 or 4 of these out a day just on Mormonish, 1 minute short, just about what's going on. But I was going to finish my comment about the previous story, just saying that the lines, when it's a medical practitioner, sometimes those can be blurred, or people can try to blur those, saying it was a procedure. Was it a procedure? It can get a little dicey there and not as clear cut. So the fact that this case over and over is in the news, I think it's horrific yet educational, perhaps, and maybe can do some good just to raise awareness. So, but you're right. This is your neck of the woods, RFM. This is Everett. And this was the other big story. The LDS Church is facing another lawsuit, this time for something that happened decades ago, but they're being accused of not taking any action at the time. And so I think we can just play this really quick. It's 1 minute, kind of goes over some of the details in Everett in King County.
This is a good lawsuit. I think this one's got legs against the church.
Oh, I think
they
so
look
too.
like they're liable.
Oh,
if
yeah.
these allegations are correct.
Yep. There's a new lawsuit against the LDS Church that I wanted to make you aware of. This was filed in King County in Washington State. It involves events of the early 2000s and a perpetrator named David Herget, who had already gone to prison for molesting his own daughter in 1993. He was excommunicated. Now, members of his ward and leadership petitioned, wrote letters to get him out. He was released after 180 days of a 7-year sentence and sent back to the ward, allowed to attend, allowed access to children, like being the person who passes out programs, creating programs with candy, having kids helping him put the candy and the programs together, playing Santa at the ward parties. I can't even comprehend the level of people not understanding that a person like this should not be back in the ward. Now there's a suit, 4 victims claiming the ward knew, leadership knew, and did nothing. Yep. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And we have seen these crop up more recently, I think, where people say, look, this happened decades ago, but they should have known better. And in this case, like you say, RFM, I think they have a good case. This gentleman was in the ward. He was convicted. He pled guilty. He was in jail. Leadership wrote letters to try to get him released. He's repentant. He's so sorry. In fact, the saddest part, one of the families in the ward that wrote a letter, because he was released, their own child ended up being one of the victims. So, but again, you just have this feeling like I want to forgive. I call it the I love you, Brother Bundy syndrome, right? Ted Bundy was in a ward when he was arrested, and the ward members wrote a giant greeting card. They colored it. We love you, Brother Bundy. We hope you come back. So I'm not saying there shouldn't be forgiveness. I'm just saying, oh my gosh, please.
I'm surprised Word Radio if Word Radio had been around, they would have started a GoFundMe for Ted Bundy.
They might have started a GoFundMe, but this gentleman
Ted Bundy GoFundMe.
Ted Bundy GoFundMe. Oh my God. We can't laugh. This is a terrible topic. He was let back into the ward. He had been excommunicated initially. He was rebaptized, and somehow the ward leadership, and they listed everybody that was okay with this, thought it would be okay that he pass out programs, have contact every Sunday with little kids, create programs where there are candy in it, have the kids come to his house to help put together these special programs. And then,
you know what's going to crucify the church? Santa Claus.
I was going to say
Christmas party.
Santa Claus. There's a whole list of the leaders that suggested him to be Santa in 2004 and 2005 at the
What
ward
could go
party.
wrong?
I can't even imagine. I just think there's this naivety. Oh, he's fine. He served his time. He's been rebaptized, right? A new person. He's not going to have these problems again. Yeah.
Repentance. I think that's the name of like the seventh reindeer for Santa Claus is repentance.
Yeah, I think it could be on repentance. But in this case, very tragic ending because there may even be more victims, but 4 have come forward, said they have suffered, systemic abuse there in that ward 2 decades ago. And now I will mention that the perpetrator, when he was arrested in early 2000, after Santa, after the programs and the 4 kids came forward, he actually committed suicide in jail. He is no longer here. But the lawsuit is here because it's against the LDS Church for not protecting these little boys at the time from this man that they knew. They knew his whole story, his arrest, getting him out early, and then giving him this access to the children. So we'll keep an eye on this, but it's very interesting to see. It's not a suit against the perpetrator. It's a suit about the church for not protecting.
It's almost like the leadership was telling the local leaders, just sort of follow the spirit when it comes to protecting the kids.
Yeah.
You know what that's going to tie into, don't you, Rebecca?
I do. There's a lot of that today. Follow the spirit. So it doesn't necessarily always work. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And you especially, RFM, because that's right up there in your area. So we'll expect, some info from you on that next time.
And I'm so sorry because, a normal person hears a horrific story like that and they go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. A lawyer listens to it and they think, man, that's worth a lot of money.
That could be it.
Sorry.
Well,
that's all I had on that, Bill. Back to you.
Okay. The next story is we all are aware of this, but thousands gathered last week in Salt Lake City to bid farewell to Russell Nelson, the late president of the LDS Church, whose life looms large in modern Mormon history with all the changes that he made. The funeral at the conference center drew about 20,000 attendees, while another 18,000 or so visited during the public viewing beforehand. Family members, church leaders, and others shared memories of Nelson's legacy as a spiritual figure, heading the church until age 101. During the service, speakers shared messages of healing, visionary leadership, and hope, grounded in eternal family doctrine. The Tabernacle Choir sang Nelson's own hymn, Our Prayer to Thee, weaving his influence into the musical liturgy. While the funeral format avoided heavy ritual, it functioned as a public display of the faith's message that death is not ultimate and connection continues beyond the grave. I remember President Packer's The Unwritten Order of Things, and that a funeral, you should never let someone's death get in the way of a good missionary lesson. And I think the talks here probably fit pretty well into that. So there's that. But they certainly did honor him too, which is more than a lot of folks who pass away in the LDS Church get for their funerals. Any thoughts from you guys on just the funeral itself?
Well, they didn't hew to that rule even at Packer's funeral. In fact, they made a comment about it, that he would stand up and strike them or something if anybody tried to preach at his funeral, right? That was the line. Something other than just a missionary message, plan of salvation, gung-ho. If somebody did that and broke that rule, he would stand up and smite them. But they didn't anyway, and he didn't stand up.
No.
No. Well, a funeral is just a church meeting. I've researched this quite a bit, and it really is. It even says in the handbook, the wishes of the family can be followed, if you choose, but the church is in charge, the leadership's in charge, and it's primarily a missionary tool. I will ask the question, was President Nelson's coffin up front and center in front of the red chairs? Because if we all remember, poor Sister Holland, Patricia Holland, her coffin during her funeral in the same location was wedged over by the organ. So I'm guessing that President Nelson was front and center.
Was it in the same location? I confess to not having seen
the conference center
funeral, but I remember seeing her funeral, and it seemed like it was in some kind of place with,
it was
that on the stage here?
Center,
it seemed a smaller area, but
I don't know.
In my memory, I could.
Well, have somebody Google it quick in the comments.
Okay.
I'll just note too, a couple of stories tangentially connected inside the meeting where a new prophet is chosen. This was in the Deseret News, and this article takes us inside what the LDS Church calls the apostolic interregnum.
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 Yeah,
everyone knows that word now, right? It's a brand new word we all learned. Wow.
Regis Philbin. Okay, that's king, right? Regnum, kings, between kings.
Yeah, the interim period between prophets, in this case, laying out how a successor is chosen after the death of President Russell M. Nelson.
By the way, let it not be forgotten, it was the Mormons who chose the title for this period of time as interregnum, which tells you what they think of prophets, that they are actually kings as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in this faith, they sort of are. Laying out how a successor is chosen after the death of President Russell M. Nelson, the process is presented, and again, this is Deseret News. They're presenting it as an orderly process, almost mechanical. When the prophet dies, the first presidency dissolves, and the quorum of the 12 apostles assume control until they convene and formally reorganize. According to the piece, the senior apostle, now Dallin H. Oaks, calls the meeting of the 12, and they gather traditionally in the temple, though current renovations in the Salt Lake Temple may shift the locale, to consider two questions. Quote, should we reorganize the first presidency now? And, quote, if so, who should be set apart as president? Unquote. Apostolic tradition and precedent point to unanimity as the deciding factor. And while the Deseret News wants to also credit spiritual confirmation in the decision, the conclusion has always been that the most senior apostle gets called as the new president of the church. This description, and by the way, based on seniority, not age. So when I say senior, the person who has served the longest, unless RFM, I think you noted this last time we had a conversation, but if two leaders are set apart on the same day as new apostles, then the oldest of the two is the one who would then be the president of the church.
It has become
an exception there. Isn't there an exception, RFM? I think there's an exception with two. I can't remember.
There's all sorts of exceptions because this process has gone through a refining period ever since it was first used. And so, because Brigham Young had a kid who, when he was a teenager, he just ordained him as an apostle. He's not a member of the quorum of the 12. He just ordains his freaking kid as an apostle. And Brigham Young's the prophet, so he can do whatever he wants to do. And when Brigham Young passes away, the kid comes in and says, okay, I'm ready to take my place. What was it? I think it was when he had outlived every other apostle in the quorum of the 12. And then he comes forward and says, I'm ready to take my place as president. And that's when the quorum of the 12 had a vote, and they decided, no, you actually had to have seniority inside the quorum of the 12. Yeah. And Brigham Young had taken care of it being consecutive versus non-consecutive. So it had to be consecutive time. Whoever has the most seniority as a member of the quorum of the 12 is the president of the church.
And that was done in part because of a grudge against Orson Pratt, if I'm not mistaken. And Pratt actually would have been most seniority by, I think, age, and Young then changed it to who had been in the 12 the longest.
We also took out Orson Hyde, who was just a notch ahead of Orson Pratt, I think. And Orson Hyde had done so many nice things for Brigham Young, for his image, for his reputation.
He
for
had
his legend.
Yeah. This description is fascinating, not just for what it includes, but for, maybe I missed the part here. Let me see. No, okay. This description is fascinating, not just for what it includes, but for what it omits. There is no discussion of contested succession, dissenting voices, or alternate models of prophetic authority. It portrays the process as a divinely scripted choreography, tight, seamless, unquestioned. But the silence around power dynamics, charisma, and institutional control, and how rank determines destiny underscores how tightly Mormon ecclesiology guards its internal rituals. For those outside or those who have left, the ritual's certainty can feel more like a theater of authority than an open spiritual process. And I'll just note, it's interesting that we set this up so that the church is led by revelation, but then we have such a formal process with rules and procedures that when you get to the end of the maze, it's always the same winner every time. That's a strange thing. And then the last little story here that goes along with this is the Salt Lake Tribune put a story out. The new president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will inherit a global faith far more diverse than many realize. And so with the passing of Russell Nelson, Dallin Oaks is expected to assume leadership of the church. Though, as you guys pointed out before we did the show tonight, that hasn't happened yet.
Mm-mm.
And I don't know if you want to say something, either of you, but in the past, today would have been the day that it would have been announced.
Or even a week
When you
ago.
say that,
It's
you
been
mean just the
interesting.
average length of time? Is that what
What
you
was that?
mean?
Not since Wilford Woodruff have we had this length of time, right? So people are starting to get antsy, especially today. But if you look at it, the last several prophets, the Sunday after the funeral is when they would meet in the solemn assembly and they would make the decisions, and then they would appoint the new prophet, and then they would make the announcement the next day. But of course, the funeral was put off because of conference, right? So the funeral's put off a week. And so everybody's expecting, okay, that means Sunday, they must have met yesterday, and today is going to be the announcement. But then people started to notice, well, Elder Stevenson, he's in Elko, Nevada, dedicating a temple. He's not there. So did they meet? They didn't meet. I think Elder Cook has also gone somewhere. So there's a lot of chatter on faithful channels and Post-Mormon, of course, who are watching it, just wondering, this is very different. Could there be another reason? I have an insider who told me it's going to be coming out by Saturday. Okay. So that would mean just kind of a random announcement. People predict perhaps not another news conference, press conference. Do you guys remember President Nelson's? Do you remember how people asked him questions about women's roles? And he he very condescendingly put
I played a clip of that recently. That's why I
Peggy
know.
Fletcher Stack. Yeah, exactly. So they're predicting that possibly it will just be a recorded statement that comes out. No more questions, no more in person. Also predictions just about, maybe this length of time, the time span is because of increasingly poor health of those that are predicted to be in the top 3. I mean, maybe they have to make sure that they're okay before they announce. Anyway, this is very different from anything that we've seen before.
I do not think that President Oaks is going to allow history to not record his name as a president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
If he can help it.
I don't think he has it in him.
Over his dead body, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
The article from the Salt Lake Tribune argues that Oaks would inherit an institution that is now more globally diverse, more than most outsiders or even insiders may realize. The LDS Church has grown beyond its Utah Mormon corridor image, with a majority of its more than 17.5 million members on the rolls, that is, residing outside the United States. Yet that diversity exists amid tension. Church governance, liturgy, cultural norms, and authority structures are still overwhelmingly shaped by white, U.S.-born leadership. Now, I'll just say, too, they focus heavily on U.S. culture or Utah culture, and such an instance is not driving to or not flying to the bus accident in Africa, but then making the way to Michigan and talking about how important it was for them to be there. it often feels like Mormonism inside the United States, and specifically inside Utah, gets much more prioritized by the brethren. So there's that. Okay. In many congregations, local practices, music, dress, cultural celebrations that don't map neatly onto the American Mormon mold run into resistance or invisibility. The point of the article pushes the new president must navigate the growing gap between global membership and an institution still rooted in an American-centric hierarchy. The heart of the issue is when the institution talks about us, meaning the members, whose stories count, and who gets flattened or silenced. And the Salt Lake Tribune was suggesting that this has to be dealt with. And I would say that LDS leaders and the LDS organization can choose to deal or not deal with whatever they want to. There may be certain results they want, so they may shape policies or changes to suit those, but they also can sit still and do nothing if that's what they want to do. And I don't think they're forced into a corner to do one thing or not the other. Any thoughts from you guys on the church that Elder Oaks or whoever becomes the leader? And again, I think it's just a given, it's Elder Oaks. But since it hasn't happened yet, I guess we can leave room for somebody else. Any thoughts on the status of the church that leader is inheriting, the tension maybe that's out there in various corridors of Mormonism, and what you think they're up against or not up against?
I don't want to be inflammatory, and hopefully I'm not being. I think I'm just being factual when I say that when you consider the church's response to Michigan versus Lesotho, it answers that question. The heart of the issue is when the institution talks about us, whose stories count and whose get flattened or silenced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a story coming up later just about the Orthodoxy that's disappearing even in the LDS church here, not to mention other countries and the situations there. So that'll be interesting. I do want to ask you guys, though, we've seen the LDS church embrace many, many traditions of the Catholic Church, palm fronds, crosses, Good Friday, white smoke when the prophet is called. Will they do it? That's what they do when the Pope, the new Pope is announced, right? The conclave, and you wait for the smoke to show up, and it's gray every day, and then suddenly it's white, and there's a new Pope. Will they do that from the conference center?
So do you think they're doing this, they're delaying for dramatic effect, or because Bednar keeps doing this faux humility, saying, no, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
No. Well, he may be one of the very few ones left standing, is what I'm trying to say. You have to think about the look of, this is another one of my theories, and I did a short about this, just that the longer it goes on, where just the 12 have the power and the keys, the more confident people feel like, okay, it doesn't matter if the leaders are visibly infirm, visibly declined, visibly completely incapacitated. The 12 have the keys. We've seen it, right? So maybe it's something like that, kind of trying to reassure people that there is power, and it doesn't matter if you see the top leaders perhaps die one after another or just appear to be completely impaired. It could be something like that.
I think that Elder Oaks is, of course, going to retain President Eyring, but I think that what's taking so long is that he's having a series of cage matches with everybody else, and the winner gets to be his other counselor.
Yeah.
That's how I do it. And then I'd film it.
Not to go back to what we were chatting about earlier, but the difference between how the church handles things in Utah or the US and outside of it, it struck me a long time ago when I was serving as a bishop, and I knew that if a member of my ward came in and they had a job, but they just didn't make quite enough money, they were behind on bills, we would pay anything and everything. House payment, car payments, obviously get groceries and take care of the utility bills, but we would pretty much pay anything. And then I learned that when you get over outside of the United States, out of developed countries, you go to underdeveloped countries, there wasn't a bishop storehouse like we think of it. The church didn't find ways to feed the hungry, and the poor and the hungry in those countries were so much more serious in terms of their hunger and starvation and what they were up against versus somebody who was poor under the care of a bishop in the United States. And it was then that I learned about the Liahona Foundation, which is no longer called that. Robert Reese is, I think, one of the people who founded that and headed it up. But the idea was that they would collect donations from folks, act as a nonprofit, and come in and feed the poor Latter-day Saint children in third world countries where the church just refused to have an operating bishop storehouse or welfare program that operated in the same way that the programs inside the United States or the UK or any other developed country would operate. And it was a stark contrast. And to see that was disappointing, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more of this. I think in Africa, this is a huge problem. I touched on this with temple building last week, if you remember, where there's this view that the LDS Church is so wealthy, so opulent with their buildings, and yet on the ground aid is not necessarily matching what is perceived. And it's not going to be long before people recognize that. And whatever the backlash will be, I don't know. But I mean, I've heard reports of senior missionary couples being told, don't on a personal level, like share food. Don't use your own, we're going to try to take care of this. Yeah, exactly. Don't give your sandwich to that little girl that it's very difficult. The people coming home from there, a lot of them don't talk about it because the kinds of things that you described, Bill, that they're seeing does not match with what they believed before they left that the church is or was. So it'll be interesting to watch. It's almost like a tiger by the tail as far as Africa. And I think it's going to change everything. That's my prediction.
I think I saw a little bit of that distress on the face of Elder Godoy in General Conference when he was talking about that.
Well, interesting. Our next story here, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But controversy at Deseret Book. What's happening here, Rebecca?
Oh my goodness, that's right. It always has to be something, right? So I came across this the other day. It was let me see if I can move my slides here. Okay. First of all, I want to explain for those of you that are never Mormon or just don't know, Deseret Book is a chain of bookstores. Most people are familiar, and they are owned by the LDS Church. Some people say, no, they're not, but they are. They belong to one of the subsidiary companies, and their purpose is to provide, materials that the LDS people know and love, right? And it also says, including works on LDS theology and a different variety of materials. I think most people do know what Deseret Book is, but I wanted to start out by saying that. So I came across the post the other day. I'm not going to read this word for word because it's very hateful and unpleasant if you want to freeze it and read it. But it is a person, probably also known to most of you guys, who is upset that there's a particular book at Deseret Book. Does not think the book should be there, says it's a betrayal of our values of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a book, we'll get into more what it's about, but about a little boy that likes to dress up in some pink clothing. So, but yeah, I mean, when you hear what the book's about, you'll just say, this is ridiculous. So he is going on and on about how inappropriate this is and what a bad influence this is on the younger readers. He then goes on to say, let's not forget that the Deseret Book was a coward in taking out the miracle of forgiveness, right? Yanking it by Spencer W. Kimball. The Deseret Book caved to pressure, right? Oh my goodness. So that kind of tells you the tone of the whole thing. But he calls on everybody to contact Deseret Book, flood the inboxes, the phone lines, demand that they pull this book, right? Well, this made me extremely curious. What is this book? And the comments, were rolling in. Jacob Hansen had put up something about the author. People were agreeing with this post about, yes, how dare Deseret Book carry this particular book. So it's a book by Shannon Hale. If you are familiar with her, she was one of my favorite authors, Goose Girl and the Princess Academy. I bet a lot of you guys have read those. And she is a member of the church, although she stepped back because of the church's treatment of LGBTQ. But she writes about her background as growing up in the LDS Church because she is a Mormon, was a Mormon, will be a Mormon, right? But she has stepped back from actual participation. So the series that we're talking about here is called The Princess in Black. If any of you guys are moms out there, you probably have heard of this book. It's about a princess who's a princess by day, but at night she puts on a black outfit and she goes and solves crimes and takes care of all kinds of things. She's a true badass. So what I believe is that this is a series and it comes in boxed sets. And I think that perhaps maybe this one book that they're talking about kind of snuck through, because I agree. I think Deseret Book might have censored it right up front, but they didn't. So they're talking about the book called The Princess in Black and The Prince in Pink, right? So it talks about this prince who's a normal prince, but much like the Princess in Black, when they need his help to save a party, this whole book is about a party that might not happen because some evil emus have come to attack. I mean, this is a children's book. He puts on his pink costume, a cape, a tiara, some gloves, and he goes and he saves the party, right? So here are some of the pictures from it. Here he is, his fantastic self, and he's going to go and he saves the party by inviting the emus to participate, right? So it's a feel-good book. It's a book about inclusion, everybody getting along. Here it is. They mean humor and teamwork, tell the story that children can be anything they dream of. I don't really feel it has the overtones that the original poster was complaining about, but I, of course, had to go right to Deseret Book to see, is it there? There it is. I ordered it. When I ordered it, it was still available. I put it in my cart. I got an email confirming it. It's supposed to be here in a couple days. But if you look at the screen there, screenshot at the bottom, right after I ordered it and I refreshed, it was no longer available. So looks like everybody got to Deseret Book and they very quickly took it off the shelf. So I just thought that was really sad because she's
You're
a
saying
great
you think
author.
it happened right when you were on the computer?
Yeah. When I refreshed after I ordered and made sure that I got the email confirming it, that it was on its way. And then, maybe I turned around, did something for a minute, but I refreshed and it was gone. Yeah. Next time I searched it. So, yep. So it's taken down. So I don't know. Thoughts on that? I mean, I think it's so funny that the poster said, how dare they take out miracle forgiveness, right? Goodness. But yeah, so this book is gone. I would encourage everyone to go buy it somewhere else.
I expect this will just propel its sales in other venues.
I think it might, because look, I just promoted it. So if I have any weight, maybe people will check out this series. I mean, Shannon Hale's amazing. So
well, now they get to slap a band sticker on the front. Everybody loves a band book.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was amazed at how quickly. I mean, literally, this was probably an hour from when I first saw the post and then ordered the book, and then it was gone. So, within half a day, it all happened.
Talking about things being banned, we've got new news about Tim Ballard, who I thought was banned, but he's back out there again, RFM.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that it was Melvin M. Russell Ballard, right? Same last name, who actually said to Tim in one of their meetings, Tim, I am your father. True story. It was September of 2023, just over 2 years ago, when the church seemingly out of nowhere came out with a statement decrying Tim Ballard, somebody who used to be bosom buddies with this apostle right here, M. Russell Ballard. Actually no relation between the two, though they share the same last name. And that happened, and a lot of things have happened since. I covered a lot of things since. We haven't heard a lot from Tim Ballard recently, though he has resurfaced recently, and he has a lot of things to say about the LDS Church, and none of them good, although he does say he was excommunicated on September 25th of 2023, and he gives a few details about that. So here is Tim Ballard. He's the one on the right. He's showing up on some lady show. That's Julie Green, I guess. It's called The Prophetic Word. So it's probably evangelical Christian. And I think that's how Tim is stylizing himself now. I think he's a Catholic, but the evangelical wing, I don't know. Don't ask me. But my favorite part of this is when Tim Ballard suggests quite strongly that the reason the LDS Church excommunicated him so summarily was not because of anything that he was doing. It was because, or anything he was doing bad, it was because he was beginning to investigate satanic ritual abuse in Utah. And that involved a lot of church members / maybe leaders who got really concerned about it and excommunicated him post haste. Because I guess they knew that that would take care of the problem. Anyway, I didn't say it was a story without holes in it. But here it goes. He goes on for just about 7 minutes, and we'll stop at every little bit here to talk.
Thank you for joining today's special live show. And I want to introduce somebody to you. I know many of you guys have heard of him, of course, because of The Sound of Freedom that came out in 2023. And I know it marked so many people. I know it marked me and everybody else that I know. And so, Tim, I want to thank you for joining today's live show. I know you're in Jerusalem right now.
And at that point, I was asked to come to see President Trump at Bedminster. He asked me to run for Mitt Romney's seat, which I was more than happy to do, even though I don't love that job because I can't do what I do. Which, remember, we were under the Biden administration at the time, and we were going to expose the mass trafficking going on at the southern border. I spent 10 years as an undercover operator for Homeland Security on that border. So we were going to bust it open, child ritual abuse, which most of it's happening in Utah, where I live right now. Well, little did I know how dark and horrific it was. I got a phone call from an insider who is totally credible. He said $10 million, this was late August, early September 23. He said $10 million has just been invested. I won't name the group yet because there's a mass conspiracy investigation going on. I'm working with U.S. Congress, multiple entities internationally. This goes from Europe to, this is the biggest conspiracy in U.S. history. I just have quiet for 2 years because I had to play it like.
This is the biggest conspiracy in U.S. history. This guy hasn't changed a bit. And apparently he's got a new audience, and maybe some of them are the old audience, but I think he's got an entirely new audience. So Trump seals the border tight as a drum, and there goes his entire mission, right? I mean, I know he went to other countries, but it was mainly the border. And now he's switched, and he's investigating ritual abuse of children, which apparently is going on big time in Utah.
Can I just make a comment about that?
Utah.
Exactly. If I can make a comment about that, I think right here you see that he has switched sides, right? People from Utah, LDS people, were huge supporters of his. Huge. Even after the excommunication and all that happened, a lot of them didn't believe it. We reported on fundraisers. They were still supporting him. Here he is for the first time coming out and throwing Utah under the bus, throwing church leadership under the bus, being very critical of things like that. So to me, this says he is kind of dusting his hands or feet of Utah and that Mormon fan base, and he is moving to where I think he probably finds it to be more lucrative.
Can I tell you that the more I see this guy, by the way, haven't you missed hearing his voice? I know I have. He is delusional. He is his biggest fan. And he's so erratic that the more I look at him and listen to him, the more I understand why the church decided to deal with him the way they did.
Yeah. His way of taking what we all thought was the reason he was in trouble and turning it around so that he's really the good guy who's here to save the day. And I've seen this game plan play out before, and somebody mentioned grifter in the chat, but it is a pattern that seems to show up when someone just keeps trying to keep those on the verge of exposing someone at arm's length and away.
They call him grifter, faster than lightning. By the way, he's about ready to start talking about something where he's going to rewrite history a bit. It is important to remember the sequence of events back in 2023. You remember that Sound of Freedom, that movie that just did great at the box office about him, Jim Caviezel playing the part of Tim Ballard. I'm not sure if he's lived that down yet, but that's what he did. He played that part. A huge box office success. And then after, sometime later that summer, we find out that before the movie was released, the internal investigation going on at Operation Underground Railroad had told him he had to resign and leave the company. And he did. but they kept it quiet because we got this movie coming out, and but then it finally surfaced. And then in September, of course, is when the church went, whoa, distance. What he's going to try and do is he's going to try and conflate those two. And you'll see, I think, as you listen to what he says, where he tries to pretend that the church was responsible for him getting taken out of OUR, when that's not the case. That was before July. That was actually in June of 2023, and the church didn't move until September.
Like an undercover operation. I had to act like I was dead for a while. I was almost dead for a while. So I get a phone call saying $10 million has been sent to destroy you. I said, what's it going to look like? They said a bag of bricks, and that's all they would say. 3 weeks later, it begins from the Mormon church. Okay? Unbelievable. This is the church that I've given my life to. Okay? I have been an active member, served a mission, paid tithing my whole life, wrote multiple books for Deseret book about American history and the House of Israel and the movements of Israel and how, all sorts of things. And they come out with a defamation to Vice News. That's like the National Enquirer. It's anti-Jesus, it's pro-pedophile. And they sneak a statement, a lie, saying that basically disown me. I've never done projects with them. Total lie. I've done projects that got them over $4 million in my book sales. They said that President M. Russell Ballard, not related, but he's one of the apostles, my best friend at the time, said that he disowned me for doing immoral things. I mean, these guys lied, unbelievably lied. Now, the problem they have, and we'll talk about later, is I had already announced I was running for the...
Yeah, I wish this reporter had known enough just to ask him, so what's this couples ruse I hear about, Pam? Because that was the thing that gave it away for me. When he admitted that the couples ruse was really something that he came up with and that he taught his female cohort volunteers who are going to go down and pretend to be his wife or his girlfriend on these trips, which I never understood why. I guess the child traffickers expect the white guys to come down from America with their wives. That I don't understand the need for that. It seems that the need is driven by his need to do the couple's ruse with them. That's what a bad ruse it is. But that's what I would have said, because she's apparently buying everything he's selling.
Well, and then he alluded back when we were all reporting on it that Elder Ballard was aware that there might have to be some questionable, dicey things that were done. We all believed, probably referring to the couple's ruse. And Elder Ballard was like, you have to sometimes go in some dark places to bring the light. So I think that was one of the things that the church was like, oh my goodness, if he keeps talking, and letting people know what his best friend, Elder Ballard, was okay with or aware of, it's just going to look terrible. And so I think that's another reason they had to just sever that relationship. But right here, he clearly says Elder Ballard was my best friend. So he's dropping a lot of bombshells here. If you followed the story, if you didn't, it just seems kind of like an unhinged sort of rant. But there's a lot of information we never had before here.
Yeah, I'm tempted to believe him, but it would be nice if he had credibility, because he has none. I wouldn't believe him if he told me the sky was blue. Bill, would you believe Tim Ballard if he told you the sky were blue?
I wouldn't believe Tim Ballard for anything. This guy, all the stuff that's happened. What was the kid's name? Hardy Marty never got found. He had the psychic who was talking to Nephi. Yeah. There are so many crazy little directions. You had people on who volunteered or tried to help with his operation who ended up in strip clubs, drinking, that he's in the strip club drinking, and nothing seemed to really be designed to go find actual kids. So no,
they were practicing. They were getting in shape at the strip clubs.
No, I wouldn't believe him.
With the ketamine.
Yeah.
But here's Julie Green, prophetic word. I mean, I don't think she'd have a problem if Nephi's directing things. Remember, everybody, his response to when it came out that he has a psychic who helps him find children. Only she's about as good at finding children as Joseph Smith was at finding buried treasure. which means she never found any children. But he has her, and she is in contact with Nephi. Nephi, the Book of Mormon Nephi. Of course, they got like 4 of them in there. I'm guessing it's the first Nephi. He's the best. So she's got a line on Nephi, and he is guiding her. He is her guiding spirit to find these children, to give her revelation. And when that came out, Tim Ballard's response was not, no, that never happened. It was, yeah, of course it happened, but it wasn't that Nephi. It was my great-grandfather whose name was Nephi. That's the spirit who was guiding the child thing.
I think that's more recognizable for the LDS audience, right? My mom had tons of great-grandparents that would literally come to her house to sit on chairs, give her advice about how to do genealogy. So I think LDS people recognize that, being visited by dead ancestors.
Yes, and he's also going to find some significance in the fact that allegedly he was excommunicated on the second day of Yom Kippur. Because, I mean, he is the stuff of legend. The solar system, the calendar itself revolves about him. Can we play a little bit more, Bill?
And I was 80% in the first straw poll. Do you know what happens when a nonprofit meddles in an election? This is not small. This is criminal, allegedly. I'll say allegedly, but we know what it is. It's defamation. It's so many things. And that people that call themselves Christians and represent Jesus Christ could possibly involve themselves in such pharisaical activity. They destroyed my life, and they knew it. They intended to. I lost everything. I lost my job. I had a Simon & Schuster book deal. Lost Sound of Freedom too. No one. I mean, I was on the outs with everybody, because if the Mormon Church would denounce you, it must be true. Well, it's the ultimate backfire, because Jesus. They didn't. Ironically, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints didn't count on Jesus. I wonder often if they prayed before or during this whole thing and said, Jesus, please help us to outsmart you and lie better so that we can not let you uncover the worst thing happening on the planet. You should have on your show a guy named Jason Preston, also a member of the church. I'm sure they're going to excommunicate him soon. Well, they probably won't, because I'm being loud now. But they excommunicated me, which basically is them saying, you don't go to heaven.
Hang on a second. I do love that last bit about Jacob Preston. So if they excommunicate him, it's because of Tim Ballard. And if they don't excommunicate him, it's because of Tim Ballard.
Yeah. Either way, you'll see the evidence that he's right.
Yes. So I'm guessing that this fellow is a big advocate of ritual sexual abuse. When I say advocate, of the fact that it's occurring.
Yeah.
In Utah and Salt Lake City, and probably up in the church. I've heard rumors of this for a long, long time. I've seen very little evidence of it, but you know, the people who believe it really believe it, and the people who don't believe it are, you know, likely to believe it if you got a guy like this who's telling you it's happening. Then you know what's going to happen right after that, right? As soon as he gets the hook set in you, then come the appeals for money, and then he's just he's remaking himself with a different emergency. So this is the biggest conspiracy in the history of the country. And in Utah, what's happening in Utah is the worst thing that's happening in the country. But thank God Tim Ballard's there to take care of business.
Basically telling my wife, while violating every scripture and policy, that's I didn't get a hearing. I didn't get any kind of counsel. They didn't let. I had a witness outside. I knew enough to know that he could bail me out of this. No, he can't come in. It was the most cruel, unusual, ridiculous
Hang on a second,
backfire.
Bill.
It's a backfire.
You see, it's a strange thing that he says, I didn't get a hearing, and then he's describing what sounds an awful lot like a hearing. I mean, did you notice that?
Let his witness in.
Yeah, did you notice that?
Who might be Elder Ballard sitting in the foyer?
Yeah, they wouldn't let his witness in because his witness would have said things that would have gone, oh my gosh, this guy's innocent, let him go free. Screw what Elder Ballard is telling us to do. You must go free, my man. It's just craziness. There's only one consistent theme, and that's Tim Ballard.
Because they didn't count on my wife, who knows Jesus more than anyone I know, and they didn't count on Jesus himself. And so it's all I can start talking because it's all coming out really soon. It's massive. It's not just the church. It goes far and wide. But the church, you'll see the allegations about satanic ritual abuse that's been going on in Utah for probably decades. Jason Preston of We Are the People podcast, you need to talk to him. He's the expert on it. They knew I was looking into it because I told them. I was naively thinking they would want me to clean out satanic ritual abuse of children that's connected to people in the church. But no, we must be Pharisees. First and foremost, we whitewash the tomb and dead bones inside. I mean, the irony of this is just unbelievable. The day they tried to excommunicate, I say try because it didn't work, because Jesus is king, not them. But the day they tried to hit me was September 15th, 2023. As you know, the Hebrew calendar changes during the holiday seasons, which we're celebrating here. It's Sukkot right here, right now in Jerusalem. The whole city's dead. But September 25th, 2023 was Yom Kippur. It was the Day of Atonement, the second day of Yom Kippur. That's the day they tried to hit me. Do you know that the one day in that biblical law that you cannot, under penalty of like bad stuff from heaven, you can't excommunicate someone, is the Day of Atonement, and that's the day they tried to do it.
Can you hang on a second?
And then,
can you hang on a second? Because that's remarkable. Hey, Rabbi Joe, calling all rabbis, because this sounds like total BS. This sounds like total horse hockey to me. I think he's pulling this out of his ass in Jerusalem. Okay? I cannot believe it's true, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the one thing that you're not allowed by the law of Moses to do on Yom Kippur is excommunicate Tim Ballard. I got a feeling that's probably not true, or excommunicate anybody. I'm not sure that the Jews did they have an idea of excommunication? I don't know. I guess they would send people off maybe, or send them out into the desert. But anyway, I got a feeling that is not true. It sounds a little too self-aggrandizing, a little too on the nose to be true. Were you looking it up, Rebecca, or were you texting with somebody?
Oh, yes. I have a whole other podcast going on here on my phone. No, I was looking up some info. So, no, I think Rabbi Joe would be the best one to speak to this. But yeah, he's definitely looking for signs, making connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just waiting for him to mention President Nelson's daughter. I mean, he is saying all this stuff out loud to the community that's following him, which is the evangelical community. It's a really interesting play. And like he said, in a few weeks, he's saying things are going to come out. Things are going to heat up. I wonder what those will be. I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll see.
My hunch is that nothing will come out, because this is the moment he started down that track of talking. I was like, I've heard this 1,000 times before, where somebody who is not who they claim to be, and people have begun to be onto them. They come forward and they say, yeah, you just don't know yet. In the coming days, in the coming weeks, there are going to be lots of things that are going to prove me right. And it's good enough to get him through this interview. But mark my words, a month will go by and nothing will have happened. The news cycle moves on and he gets away with saying it.
It's like President Nelson when he said in the coming days, we'll see greater miracles than we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
That was quite a few days ago. That was years ago. And like a year and a half or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said in the coming days, we'll see all these great miracles. So, I'm looking, but I'm not seeing them. Okay, let's
quick little
finish
story, and then we'll move on to why I want you to know why we're here.
Yeah.
We're here for the same, but one of the high councilmen, a righteous man of God, went in that day and said, "What are you doing?" to like we call the stake president. He's like, "What are you doing? You violated every scripture, every rule. This guy's about to run for Senate. You don't think there's a conspiracy going on here?" And you know what he said, "Look, the world is going to think that I was part of this decision, because if you were following the rules, I would have been part of the decision as a high councilman. There's 12 of them, and since you didn't follow the rules, I can't be implicated in this publicly or privately. And so you either have to do this again the right way, or I quit." And the guy was shaking. The stake president was shaking and turning red. And he said, if you want to quit, then you have to give me your temper recommend. So basically began the excommunication process on him for standing up for righteousness in Jesus. And you know what happened in that moment, according to everyone in the room?
Tell us.
The big picture of Jesus that sits on the wall of the office comes crashing down on the Day of Atonement. And this beautiful Christ-like man said, you know, it looks like Jesus has weighed in on this, and he walked out. And yet the stake president, he never stops. He persecutes us from the pulpit, even 2 Sundays ago. Look, when I say the church, I talk about there's a deep state. There's good guys in here. There's good guys in there that know what's up, and they're trying to fix it. But you know how deep states work. Look at President Trump. I mean, imagine what he's dealing with. You know, there's a prophecy in the LDS church that says, "Upon my house it shall begin this vengeance, this whirlwind. Upon my house it shall begin, and from my house it shall go forth." That's Doctrine and Covenants 1:12. And that's, I believe, I'm no prophet, but I believe that's about to begin. And it's a beautiful cleansing. It's a beautiful revival for the guys who believe in Jesus, for the people who didn't allow some man to sit in the throne of Jesus, which is what the Pharisees did, and what these people, the deep state. I want to distinguish the deep state versus the church itself. Anyway, that's a lot. That's a lot up front, but
Yeah.
great. What an intro.
Man, I think Tim needs to do a couple more lines. What do you think?
I don't believe that story, because unless I'm getting my dates wrong, it only takes a stake president and the counselors to run an excommunication. You no longer, remember, it used to be the whole High Council, but then they decided they didn't want those guys to hear, well, somebody brilliant like Bill Reel, right, during his excommunication. So I think that there was no reason for that man to say, I should have been there. I mean, am I wrong on my dates? I think it's all made up.
There's a High Council in the room. They don't make the decision anyway.
Yeah.
They're split up into teams of 6 to ensure that the rules are followed and things are fair. But at the end of the day, the stake president gets to make the call with no matter what. It could be all 12 of those men and the members of a stake presidency who disagree with it. And it still could, he still simply could just wave his hand and make the call. Those men don't help make the decision.
Yeah. From the way he's describing it, it sounds like he didn't go.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's reporting what he says he heard from other people.
Right.
Because, you know, there's a prophecy in the Doctrine and Covenants, and it says when the picture of Jesus falls from the wall, then you know it's about to hit the fan.
And there are good people in there too, and they're trying to solve this. You wait. You see.
Yes, the good people were the ones on my side, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, strange thing.
Yes, but he's going to be saving those kids, those Mormon kids, from the satanic ritual abuse in Utah that's been going on there since the 1980s. And apparently it's just getting worse, and it's the worst in Utah than it is in any other state. Sounds like a Mormon connection to me.
Talking about Mormon connections, the family proclamation. What is the story here, Rebecca? That something's going on where this is making its way from God's lips to our ears, right?
That's it. It's a little follow-up, because I have hammered on this over the last 2 weeks, making sure that everyone has heard of the Family Manifesto. And I'm really happy to see people posting about it. Did you know about this? You know, it's kind of my mission to say, let's just have some awareness of this. But I was very curious in the written talks that are going to come out, right? You have conference where they're delivered, and then a week or so later, or even less, you have the official talk put out, you know, on the church website. It's going to be printed. It's going to be used throughout the next year's curriculum. So I was curious to see what of Elder Rasband's talk about the family proclamation and some of the things that he said that we covered last week would make it or not make it into the printed version. So I kind of took a look at it here, and what he said that was so interesting that I want to focus on here is that Elder Rasband, he used a lot of words like we went over last time about the proclamation. He did not say it was a revelation, but he said revelatory, divine origin, from God, you know, all these different words, stopping short of saying a revelation. But one of the most, you know, strong statements, excuse me, that he made is he said, the proclamation on the family is, as President Hinckley stated, doctrine. Now, this did make it into the printed, you know, talk that's online right now. And there's a footnote there. Number 17, right? So you can read this on the church's website right now. So I thought, okay, they've quoted what he did say in conference, and now there's a footnote. So let's go to the footnote and see what he said. So the footnote takes us to President Hinckley's talk when he introduced it at the women's meeting in 1995. Of course, I had to have a picture of the women's presidency going, because we talked about that too, how they had no input and it was just kind of thrust upon them. And they expressed a desire to perhaps have had some input. It might have been a little different since it is about women and children and families primarily. But President Hinckley said at that conference in 1995, in furtherance of this, we, the First Presidency and the Council of the 12 Apostles, now issue a proclamation to the church and to the world as a declaration and reaffirmation of standards, doctrines, and practices relative to the family, which the prophets, seers, and revelators of this church have repeatedly stated. So I want to ask you guys, if we go back one slide here, Elder Rasband said, as President Hinckley said, the family proclamation is doctrine. Now, when I read footnote 17, what he said there's doctrine in it, there's standards in it, there are practices in it, but did he actually say it is doctrine? I know that's a fine line, but
it's not even a fine line. It's a wide Sharpie line. It is no. He did not call it doctrine. And I just got to tell you something because I did not know this. I watched him. I watched all of General Conference. And if you can go back here a slide, or I can. When Elder Rasband said that, President Hinckley called the family proclamation doctrine. I didn't know if he had or not, but I believed you, Elder Rasband. I took your word for it. And now I find out that President Hinckley did not call it doctrine. And that what you did was you lied to my face. You need to repent, Elder Rasband, and you need to ask yourself the next time you're praying, pray to God and ask him, should an apostle of Jesus Christ be lying to the members of God's church?
Yeah, and it is an ongoing sort of argument in even faithful circles. Is it doctrine? People say no, yes, no. This pretty much put that to bed. At the most current conference, Elder Rasband said it is doctrine. Then we go to the footnote, and doctrine isn't even the first thing mentioned as far as what it contains. Standards, doctrines, plural, doctrines within it, and practices. What do you think, Bill? Is it doctrine or just contains doctrine?
Well, according to Hinckley, it contains doctrines, which means that 95% of it could be untrue, false doctrine, not doctrine. And all it would have to have is a thing or two, at least two of them, because it's plural. And as long as two true doctrines based on the LDS Church are in it, then Hinckley's comment would be true. But what Rasband does is say essentially that the entire family proclamation is doctrine. And as RFM said, those aren't even close.
Yeah, and I think my co-host Landon on Mormonish pointed out, he said, oh, this is how doctrine is made. It starts like this. It starts like this, where somebody says there are doctrines.
Yes.
Then someone else says, oh, no, he said it is doctrine. And by next conference, here, this is just a little graph showing the different things that were said. By next conference, Elder Bednar says 2035, as president, I assume he'll be president by then, Rasband has said it is doctrine. This is exactly how it follows. And you never know that it originated with President Hinckley just saying, yeah, there's some truths, some standards, some doctrines in it. So I think it's interesting. And one last thing that I noticed.
I expect he'll call it moral doctrine.
Yeah, it'll probably be moral doctrine, the covenant path of moral doctrine. It'll be something. But I just want everyone to be aware when people say this is doctrine. And when they hang that proclamation flag out in front of their house during Pride Week or whatever, they're claiming it's doctrine, but there's nothing to back that up. And I will point out that, like I said, all the new talks have come out. And if you get the app, the Gospel Library app, they have started to put the talks in scripture format almost. Now, I know this is to make it easy during Sunday school to go, let's all turn to Elder Rasband, verse 16, right? But I once heard, and I wish I could find the quote back. They said, what is current scripture? It is the words of the living prophet. Here they are. It is the church handbook and it is the church periodicals. So to me, just showing that these talks are now in verse format, I think that's one step closer to this is our doctrine, to quote a title. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
I would call it, by the way, so everybody can see, it's hard to see. There are little numbers next to each
Yeah, just like scriptures,
of
each
these paragraphs.
Yep. Yep.
They're
Have a
little gray, they're
Yep.
little grays.
Yeah.
And
Last
I
band,
would
verse
call it
17.
paragraph number so-and-so, but
Yeah.
as a faithful Mormon, why wouldn't you call it verse so-and-so? And why wouldn't everybody say amen?
Yeah, I don't know. It just struck me as kind of interesting. But anyway, little tidbit there. Just want to make sure everybody understands the trajectory of doctrine. And we'll see who now quotes Elder Rasband that it is doctrine.
Well, here's the thing. So that you know, as an attorney speaking, if Elder Rasband, if the family proclamation were a legal case, and Elder Rasband were citing to that legal case for the proposition that that legal case stands for, and he put that in his briefing the way he put it in his talk, the judge would have shredded him
Interesting.
for doing that.
Hmm.
Because it's an obvious attempt to pull one over on the court.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. So
Yep.
is there anything else?
All
I think
right.
we move on to temples unless there are any other comments on that.
No, give us our temple updates, Rebecca.
Okay, we are going to speed through this because there is a lot, as always, going on with temples. And people may wonder why I'm so fixated on temples. Why do I keep talking about them? Because I know that temple building and everything around it is where the church is forced to do the quiet things out loud. And you see the behavior and the tactics and the playbook, and you see them having to deal with cities and governments and residents, and they have to do it out loud. And people are watching, and there's a lot of scrutiny and PR. And, this is where you kind of catch a hand in a cookie jar. So, quick update, Fairview, Texas. As you know, the residents are saying that the passing of the Fairview Temple was not really passing because of a weird way that they calculated the boundaries of opposition. So anyway, there's going to be a bench trial. It means no jury. They're just going to go in. They're going to present their case in front of a judge on the 29th of October and say, hey, I think we just need to stop this right now, maybe even say it didn't pass and take it back down to the city council. So anyway, anything can happen. Bench trial. Anything you want to say about a bench trial, RFM?
This is at the trial court level then?
Yeah, this is, yep.
Well, whatever the result is,
district
to
court.
be appealed by the losing party, of course.
Of course, it's going to be back and forth. Yep. And we'll talk about, and this is the thing, the church is just involved in appeal after appeal everywhere we go. And that's what's happening here in Heber, right? We reported last.
It does. I'm so sorry. It just occurred to me, it does make sense that this would be a bench trial. It could be done basically by motion because it doesn't have to do so much with what happened. It's not factual.
No, it's procedural, completely procedural. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a matter of the interpretation of the law and whether that law was complied with. So that's a function of the judge, not of the jury.
Yep. So that'll be quick and we will see what happens there. It's interesting. Now in Heber, I let everybody know that they had started to dig. They had hit water. We talked about all the massive amounts of water needed to be pumped out every day going forward. Then suddenly there was an injunction that was supported by the district court judge saying, okay, the church has to stop everything. Stop where you are until the case, which is being brought by the residents there in Heber, goes to the Supreme Court, right? You can't work on it until everything's decided at a Supreme Court level.
Okay.
Same scenario in Cody, but they ruled, yes, you can keep building, and they did. They got it almost all done before, the Supreme Court didn't go the way they wanted it to. So people sent me pictures. They are still working on that site. Dump trucks, gravel. This seemed very strange to me. I couldn't quite understand, how are you working when there's an injunction saying you are not allowed to work at all? So they continue to work, and what they've done is they have appealed the decision to, stop the construction. But still, it seems like they should not be working while this appeal is in place. So like you said, RFM, it's just a series of appeals. They're saying, nope, we got to be able to work while this lawsuit, which could take years, makes its way up to the Supreme Court in Utah.
If whatever they're doing on the property has been enjoined, it's a very quick thing to have them in front of court for a contempt proceeding. And again, go in front of the judge and get a motion and an order to show cause as to why they shouldn't be held in contempt for violating the court order. On the other hand, it's possible that what they're doing is within the limits of the court order, that they're not actually constructing anything. I don't know.
And that's what I think, is that they're working on the infrastructure, the ground, gravel. They've stopped digging, as far as I know. They've stopped, they haven't installed the pumps. They're just putting gravel around. So, but the residents are keeping an eye, and we'll let you know how this appeal goes whether the Supreme Court says, all right, I'm overriding what the district court judge says, you can work on it while we wait for this lawsuit from the residents to make its way all the way up to the Supreme Court and get a judgment. Now, I know they're highly motivated to finish this temple. It's a showcase temple, right? Have you noticed that some temples are just kind of small and others are, these giant showcase? Heber Valley is where a lot of general authorities, a lot of apostles. Uchtdorf has a house that kind of looks down over here, a second house, third house. I'm not sure. I've been up there, I've seen it. But this is going to be a huge temple, 210 feet tall, 88,000 square feet. And its main purpose is to bring the girls from girls' camp. They attend right there in Heber from all over, all summer long, to do baptisms for the dead. So it's a huge deal, a huge destination, and they need to get that done because they've got to do those baptisms and get those girls invested.
If the font were actually a natural spring, that would be cool.
It would be kind of cool. I know. So we'll keep watching. But boy, this has been I can't believe I'm still 2 years later reporting on legal shenanigans having to do with Heber. Okay. Elko, Nevada was just dedicated. Elder Stevenson was there, right? This is one of the reasons we believe they probably didn't have that solemn assembly yesterday, because I think he was in Elko, unless he flew back and forth really quick. But there were some very inspiring things that happened. And it's really funny. I was sent this article about Elko from a friend of mine, now a friend, a resident in Lone Mountain, who has done that fight of the temple in Lone Mountain. Now this person is so interested in Mormonism, and she's like, let's file this in things that never happened, right? Because here are two inspiring stories from Elko. It says, one man had prayerfully considered returning to religion and returning to God. He started crying as soon as he entered the temple. And at the end of the tour, he said, I have to join this church. What do I need? Who do I need to talk to join this church? Right? Desired effect. That was just the open house. Oh my gosh. Another woman, wanted to return to church, and she was deeply touched in the temple there. And now she's going to church regularly after attending the open house. So miracle from the Elko, Nevada temple. But I just thought it was funny that my, never Mormon resident friend from Lone Mountain is like, oh my gosh, right? Because they're dealing with their own temple construction, which is starting soon. So I did want to mention, we talked last time a little bit about the new temple building playbook, right? And all these temples have examples of this. So everything they've kind of done before, announcing it, huge media out in front, everybody watching, that was so problematic, right? All of us watched, all of us put a spotlight on it, and there was such negative PR. So I believe, as I stated last week, the new temple building playbook is no announcement. Okay, I made that prediction before conference, right? And what happened? No announcement, right? Keep the location under wraps. Work with the stakes behind the scenes. Have PR liaison spokesmen in place well before anybody in the neighborhoods know anything that's happening. Also, work with the cities behind the scenes. Have an inside man, someone who's a member of the church, maybe on city council, maybe on planning commission, and then limit emails that you send out that could be intercepted by somebody like me. So this is kind of my prediction that I've talked about before, but now I have a couple examples of actually seeing that this is starting to happen. So it's kind of interesting. I want to talk about the Houston South LDS Temple. We did mention this last week, and I want to let everybody know that Generally Unquotable lives right there in that area, and she's putting out really good information that the church is following this playbook that I just showed there. Inside man, LDS member, everything under wraps, nothing really put forward. So we're going to continue to watch the Houston South LDS Temple, which is in a suburb, a little area called Sienna, I believe it is. But she is right there, like literally on the ground. And so we're collaborating kind of on that. Now, here's something that I think is very interesting. As we all know, at conference, Elder Oaks got up and he said, we're not going to make announcements at this conference of temples. Everybody has speculated on what that means. No longer ever in general conference, just not this general conference. We talked about the list that we predicted. There was a list that, was thrown in the trash. I've since had confirmation from a person that saw the list on a computer. There was a list that, just like we guessed, was kind of said, no, not so much, not going to do that. But I believe that we have discovered one of the missing temples that was on the list, never announced, but is under, they're working on it right now. So I was given this article about a developer who sold some of his land, and it clearly says right here, the property will become the site of a new temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, making a significant addition to the South Lake, Texas community.
So this is a location that has never been announced.
Exactly. And I tried to look it up because I thought sometimes they'll say it's the Austin temple, but it's really over here. All of these are the temples in Texas right now that have been built, under construction, or announced, and they're all accounted for. None of them are in South Lake, right? Now, the interesting thing about South Lake is that that makes 4 temples within a 30-mile radius of each other in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This is just about 30 miles, I think, away from Fairview.
So this is not the Houston, Texas South Temple?
No, that's another one. This is what I'm saying. This is, boy, temple watching is going to go underground and be a lot harder to navigate. So this temple, according to this developer, the land has been sold to the church. A temple is going to be built in South Lake, Texas, and we don't know anything about it, and it's never been announced, right? Playbook. Remember that? That's what I just showed you guys. Let's see. Okay, this just shows a little bit where it is. The developer had tried to put a housing development together and have it there, but it was shot down. So instead, the church is going to buy it. I still feel like there may be some housing development that's going to go on around it, but it's very interesting. So this temple does not exist on any kind of list. I made a post or two about this, and somebody piped up and said, oh yeah, they're already assigning callings in South Lake about this temple, probably PR liaison, spokesman, that kind of a thing. So exactly what I thought. With the Playbook, things happen behind the scenes. The stake knows it's going in. They're assigning people, right? The developers know because they sold the land and that's what they were told it was used for, but it's never been announced. So I just throw it out there that I think South Lake, Texas is a place where they are going to be building an LDS temple.
Well, great research on your part.
Yeah, we'll have to watch. It's interesting. So, and why does this matter? Okay, I'm going to go through this just really quickly because I think this is the most important part. So there's a podcast on the faithful side called Let's Get Real. Yeah,
that should have been your show, Bill.
Yeah,
Why
it should have been
your show.
It should have been. You could have been pointing like that. You could have been doing that whole thing. Let's Get Real with Stephen Jones, right? And after President Nelson had passed away, but before we knew that President Oaks was not going to announce any temples, this podcast aired with this gentleman here, who is the former executive director of Temple Department, Elder Larry Y. Wilson, right? And Generally Unquotable came across this, and this is, she's so awesome. If you guys haven't subscribed to her, please do. But I wanted just to go through, I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to go through a few statements that he made that kind of, I don't know, show you how the sausage is made in temple building. And he seems really excited about sharing it. And the host seems really excited. But when I listened to it, I was like, I wonder what faithful members would think about this. So he says, these are his words this is from the transcript of the video. He says, Elder Quentin Cook was the executive director of the council that oversees temples and family history, and he created a temple planning committee. Okay, well, that's interesting. A temple planning committee exists, right? And the church hadn't had that before. Before, they had an informal process for determining where they'd build the temples. And at this time, President Monson, so this is prior to 2018, he hadn't announced any new temples for a few years because he'd been very, very ill, right? So no temples. And before that, just kind of, I think we'll announce one here or there. Now they're going to get organized. Now they have a committee, right? The committee developed a plan, presented it to President Monson. It was accepted. It was a 15-year plan. And President Monson said, sure, we'll build about 4 to 5 temples a year. That was the pace that he was comfortable with. And so based on that plan, he started to announce some new temples in about 2014, kind of started up again. So Temple Department, they create the plan. They give it to the prophet. He says, that sounds good. 4 or 5 temples a year. We're going to do this. Okay. Sounds good, right? Then what happened? President Monson passes away and we have President Nelson. You would think if temple building was, God telling everybody where to build, it would be consistent, right? From prophet to prophet. They're simply listening to what God's saying. But you're going to see that's not the case here. So the temple chairman person here says, President Nelson became the prophet and we thought we better present this 15-year plan to him, so he's in the know about temples, and they're very proud of it, he says. And they were so excited that the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 had received it very well, right, prior to Nelson. So President Nelson becomes the prophet January of 2018, and the temple committee presents the plan to him within the first 30 days. They explain the computerized tool that they have developed to be able to come up with this 15-year plan, right? Who knew? There's some kind of temple algorithm. How interesting. The variables that we'd incorporated into it in terms of membership of the church, tithing, faithfulness, growth of the church, distance to a temple, cost to get to a temple, and various other variables. So that's why I picked this old-timey computer room, because I just picture him putting all that data in, right? Yeah. So
those are all good things to consider when building a new temple. That makes sense.
They do. But, that's not how we're told it happens. We're told that God simply tells the prophet where it goes, right? We don't know anything about this kind of stuff. So they're explaining all this to President Nelson. He's taking it all in. We make the presentation and we show him, here's the priorities that we've come up with, and these are the variables that we've described. And so he says, probably about 60 new temples, right?
In 15
he has
years.
a list of 60 new temples. That is going to probably, see all through the rest of President Nelson's reign, right?
And then some.
No. He listens to the whole thing. He's just trying to understand what's there, how we got there. And after we finish the presentation, so he doesn't really say anything that signals where he's headed until we're done. I finished the presentation, 60 new temples, and he says there needs to be another 0 after the total. Another 0. 600 new temples is what President Nelson wants this committee to prepare for. So they walked out of the room and they said, okay, obviously we're far off the mark that he had in mind. Back to the drawing board. We redid the plan. We expanded it substantially and we brought things forward. And he immediately began announcing larger numbers of temples than he had ever done prior. So he was headed for 600.
Than anybody had done prior.
Exactly. But 600, can you imagine? Would he have started maybe sensing that he was declining, announcing 40 at a time? 50 at a time, 80 at a time. I have no idea. That just blew me away. 600 temples. And then goes on to say, so he announced 200 temples overall. And we are around 400 in terms of those that are operating or have been announced or are in construction or planning. And this is true. But of the 200 he announced, only like 28 have actually been finished. There's a lot of variables that get considered. So we put those numbers into the computer model. And once they came out, we take them into consideration other things too. So I have my little graphic here of God, which is what we were always told how a temple was arrived at on his computer, right? All the numbers, all the algorithms. So here's what I think is really interesting.
Rebecca, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please do.
How many have actually been completed? Did you say 28?
Of the ones he has announced, 200, and 28 of his announcements have been completed. 28.
Because he was president of the church for 7 years. 7 times 4 is 28.
Yeah.
So they're still on the same track of building 4 temples a year.
Yeah, they can't get off that track. According to Laura Lee Hall, the former, head temple architect, because it's all centralized, everything has to be run through the same 15 people. There's no way they can expand and build more unless they were to have, like, say, a South American, building head that could approve everything. But the way it's centralized, they can never make more than maybe 8 to 10 is what they're saying. So yeah, it is kind of interesting. But here's, I think, one of the more interesting things as we finish up here. So he said, so we had Russia on the list, right? Russia on the list, a temple somewhere in Russia, but we didn't have a specific location and it was far down on the list. Okay, so that's interesting, right? We kind of think that before each conference, President Nelson or whoever the prophet is gets some information for a few temples, right? But it sounds like there's a list. Like, could there be a list of 600 out there? There possibly could. So in this case, he describes how President Nelson jumped the list, right? He went down on the list and said, you know what? I'm going to announce Russia, right? That's what I'm going to do because that has massive crowd appeal. And he did. But to me, that reveals that there.
Or after he announced it, the people who were in charge of implementing it moved it way down on the list because they knew they didn't have a place to put it.
Yeah, well, no, but it says right here already, it says Russia was way down on the list. So, and it says here that he forgot the number for consideration to be announced at conference, and he just said we need to add Russia. So that to me tells me that there's a huge list, and he just at his discretion goes this. So the final takeaway here, is, but now, and he's talking about what we're doing now prior to conference. It's like they're declaring if it's going to be there, then they're going to figure out the details after the fact, right? This is what we saw. Fairview, Heber, Lone Mountain. They're just going to say it's going to be built, and then they'll figure it out. That's really powerful. Actually, it reminds me of First Nephi chapter 1. I don't know how we're going to get the plates, but we're just going to get them. God damn it. I added that, not him. Well, the old way was to have all the planning done. So silly. Have the site secured. Ridiculous. And we have approvals to be able to proceed to build on the site. Oh, who would do that, right? And we wouldn't announce until all those things in their place. But now there's a new way. Okay. This new way was talked about a week before conference. This is so powerful. It was electric with the revelatory feeling that a prophet recognized that we are approaching a millennial day. So here's my thought. Looks like the old way is the new way, right? Because this is exactly what they're going to do now. They're going to secure the site. They're going to have everything in place. They're going to do every single thing and then announce it so that things like Fairview, Lone Mountain, Heber, Cody, those don't happen in the public eye because the PR is so negative. So I thought that was fascinating.
Well, of course they're going to do that because this is the way a lawyer would do it.
Yes.
The heart surgeon is going to announce them out of the blue, thinking that God has revealed to him
from the heart
names and locations for temples without knowing anything else about it, except maybe where it is on the globe. And here comes Oaks as the attorney coming in. No, we're stopping this right now. This has been killing me. And we are finding out, this is at least one way that we're finding out what happens when Robert Duvall becomes the godfather, when the attorney takes over the family.
No, it makes me rethink every one of the pictures we've seen of him, or the interactions where maybe Oaks is just going, oh my gosh, like, you haven't thought this through, because I think Oaks kind of thinks things through. So anyway, that's all I had on that. And I do question, Bill, maybe we save my Orthodoxy story till next week, since it's kind of a longer one. What do you think? Oh, I can't hear you, Bill. Oh,
I think he's
I don't know what he's saying. What's he saying? Is he signing it? I can't tell.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah, we'll skip through. I'm just going past here to find the slide that you have another story after that, Rebecca.
I have a teeny tiny little ending thing, and that's it. Yeah. So that's my suggestion, that we save Orthodoxy until next week. We kind of touched on it this week. And I just bring this one last thing up. Did you have any other thing, Bill, before or after this?
Nope. We're
okay.
Good.
Perfect. Then I think we're done. So this was just one little tidbit. Everybody is talking about security, church security, right? Yes. With everything that's going on. And the church has put out a letter that I guess was read to leadership. And the letter goes through, some things that they need to do to prayerfully look at implementing the things that are in the church handbook. There's a huge section on security. One of the major parts of the handbook on security says, always follow the promptings of the Holy Ghost. So that's kind of interesting that's their advice for security. A lot of people have questions about weapons on church property, and it still does say in the handbook that firearms and other lethal weapons are not allowed on church property. This includes concealed weapons. This does not apply to current law enforcement officers. And I've seen a lot of buzz on faithful social media where they're like, okay, well, every ward needs to have, some kind of law enforcement officer that is concealed carrying. People are very, very concerned. And I kind of predict that this little list over here on the side, be careful, stay in groups, lock doors. I think people want more than that. People are questioning, why can't they pay for security? Someone said, well, they won't even pay for a janitor. Why would they pay for security? But I don't know. And this is not just a problem with the LDS Church. I mean, all places where people gather are trying to figure out how to keep their people safe. Do you guys have any comments on just general church security or this letter that was read before I go to the next slide?
Yeah, this is worthless. This is nothing. This is to give the appearance of doing something when you're not doing anything. Yeah. They don't even have on this list, which one thing that I think they should have, which is if somebody runs into your church building with a pickup truck, don't run outside to try and help them.
Yeah. Oh, Bill, sorry.
The spirit is the least effective way, I think, to stop this violence. And it's the number one thing, right? The letter asks people to follow the guidance of the spirit as you implement established policies and procedures. Just tell people to implement established policies and procedures. One doesn't need the spirit to do that. It's already written out what the policies and procedures are.
Build working relationships with emergency response personnel. Can you imagine that that's even a bullet point on this list?
Will they get there faster?
They're trying to have more things on their list when you see things like this. That doesn't even make any sense. So go make friends with the police, because that's going to help with the security.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Things like this will continue to happen from time to time, and I don't think this list will stop it. So unfortunately.
It does say, I do want to say this, okay, and I know we're late and I apologize.
Oh, we're not too late now, but I skipped my story. Go ahead.
Okay, but it says, second from bottom, have emergency response procedures in place that include active shooter training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
Well,
looked
that
in the
makes sense,
handbook.
but where do you get the active shooter training?
So that you do go to the handbook, and it's about 6 or 7 pages long. That's why I didn't include it here. But active shooter is just your standard run, hide, fight, right? It's just your hierarchy that you would hear anywhere. So, and as my co-host Landon pointed out, none of this would have stopped, what happened in Michigan. I picked up a post that just yesterday, a guy showed up in a Texas ward with a knife. He went to the missionaries, started Bible bashing. It was a dangerous situation with a weapon. So I feel that faithful LDS are going to be clamoring for just more specific guidelines, more specific help, more specific, things in the building, some kind of security. There's got to be other things that they can do. And I think this is going to spearhead a lot of change. But in addition to this, this woman, I found this post. She said, yeah, I'm 66. And I was asked, someone from the ward called me in leadership and said, would you do this week on Sunday light security duty in the foyer? Right? So I'm not disparaging anyone who's 66. I myself on Wednesday am entering the 6th decade, if you can believe that or not, on Wednesday.
You're going to be 60 on Wednesday in 2 days?
I prefer to say 6th decade. Okay.
We're not going to get a chance to sing happy birthday to you.
You're not.
Before that, we need to sing it to you now.
Oh dear.
Bill, you ready?
Oh my
Everybody?
God.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
He's muted.
To you. Happy birthday, dear Rebecca Biblioteca. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, you guys are awesome. I like the primary versions, like this month is such a special one. I know all of those. Anyway, I just think it's funny that this 66-year-old woman, the ward must have gotten together and talked about those guidelines from this slide here. And what they came up with is, we'll call sister so-and-so. She's 66. She can take them down in the foyer. Yeah, she can. So
this shows you how seriously the church takes this.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a bother.
Yes.
It's a burden. We got to find somebody to fill this calling. So, sister 66-year-old, you're up.
You're up. Yeah. And she had some questions. She wasn't able to do it because she had to play the organ for somebody at that time, but light security, what does that mean exactly? I'm not sure. So I'd be curious, those of you that do attend wards, have you seen changes? What kinds of things are they talking about? But speaking of security, military strategy, this is probably the best thing that's ever been sent to me. Yeah. Actually, it's too small now for me to read. RFM, you reposted this. Do you want to read this post that was sent to me?
I did repost this. Thank you, Rebecca.
Oh, gosh.
This is, apparently there's a faith promoting rumor out there that I hadn't heard until today. It's captured here in the slide. The U.S. military relies on battle strategies from Captain Moroni. Yeah. So this person, who is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, says, just a fun little factoid for the day, ! Did you know the U.S. military uses the war chapters of the Book of Mormon to teach military strategy? CPT Moroni is seen as one of the best military strategy minds ever, even in the U.S. military.
Source, please.
Yeah, here's the source. Look, she goes on to talk about how her husband, was taught this in the military.
Can you read that?
right? I can read it. She says, when my husband was in the ROTC, they were required to read the war chapters of the Book of Mormon and discuss Captain Moroni's military strategies. They are used often by the U.S. military. Even now that he has been in a while, I think that's her husband, many soldiers know who that is simply from their military strategy discussions, right? And people are questioning on her about it. She says, it's generally true. As I said, they did a lot with it when my husband was in ROTC. He didn't go to a church-owned school. So this is not church-owned, not Utah. He had heard about it a lot in almost 2 decades in the military. Granted, every officer may not teach that, but a lot of us non-LDS do. But a lot of non-LDS do. I always thought it was pretty cool, and people kind of went nuts over it. This person's describing all the amazing strategy in the Book of Mormon, you know,
so cool.
which of course is 19th century. My co-host Landon said, as a former Army officer, I can tell you this is completely false. Why would anyone study Nephite tactics with the Lamanites when we have detailed battle strategies of Middle Earth between the hobbits, elves, and the dwarves, right?
The Battle of Pelennor Fields is particularly instructive.
Yes. Now, but
I mean, this guy, either this guy is just lying, or he's a Mormon who ran into another Mormon who's an ROTC. I mean, my gosh, it's not exactly the Pentagon. He's an ROTC, right? And so he uses a couple of these things because he's a Mormon.
Right.
And so now this guy has extrapolated that into being used nationwide by the Army to teach its military cadets, its finest minds, how Captain Moroni won the battles for the Nephites.
Oh my goodness. And I put this, I posted this several places, and one post caught my eye. The guy said, I taught ROTC at BYU for 15 years. We do not cover this, but I did remind me, my parents used to tell me that Captain Moroni was in George Washington's tent. George Washington would be out fighting all day, come back battle weary and tired. And there's Moroni, with a hot cup of coffee and saying, let's sit down. Let's go over this. So we owe America to Captain Moroni. That's what my parents taught me.
Yes. Well, the story I heard was it was worse than that. Moroni was in George Washington's cot.
Oh,
be that as it may. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one who used to hear this.
Who played the
missionary? I'm sorry, Bill. What?
Who played the trumpet?
Yikes.
I just go on with my story since this isn't Mormonism After Dark. Like I didn't start this, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, no, when I'm at the MTC in 79, everybody knew that the CIA sent their agents. No, actually, they came over to study at the MTC the language training that was going on because they couldn't believe that young men and women were learning these foreign languages so much faster than they could teach their CIA agents these foreign languages. So they would send CIA guys, spooks, if you will, over to the MTC so they could study the techniques that were used at the MTC. And then they go back and try them at the CIA. They just didn't work. And you know why that was, don't you, Rebecca? Because they didn't have the Holy Ghost.
Be the Spirit. Yeah.
They didn't have the Holy Ghost.
No.
They're spooks, but they didn't have the Spirit.
Yeah. So I'd be curious, anybody in our chat who has military experience, if they were ever asked to read the war chapters, and then a lot of other comments I saw as I posted this are, what strategy? In the Book of Mormon, they basically build something to hide behind. What strategy? So anyway, that's all I got.
There's that. Well,
there's one strategy that they use twice. It's the same one, and they stole it from Joshua. So you could just go to the Bible.
You
go
could
to the source if you want.
Yeah.
Faith promoting rumors are always fun. All right. So on the radar, what do you guys have going on this week? And we'll wrap up here.
Okay, I wanted to put really quickly Thrive, because this is an amazing organization, an amazing opportunity, amazing speakers. There are 2 Thrive conferences coming up in the next couple of weeks. Thrive Lehi is going to be Saturday, November 1st. You can see Noah Rashada. Oh my gosh, Alan Mount. Lauren is going to be really awesome speakers. Go to thrivebeyondreligion.com and you can get tickets. It's very inexpensive and it's a whole day, just like hanging out and talking Mormonism, post-Mormonism. It's going to be fantastic. If you're more in the Phoenix area, that event is going to be on the 15th. And Britt is going to be there. I didn't notice that. So anyway, fantastic. You can read up on all the details on Thrive Beyond Religion. And then, of course, if you really want to mark your calendars far ahead, you got Thrive February 22nd, 21st and 22nd in St. George. But we
better mark our calendars that far ahead, shouldn't we, Bill?
Hey, you have to.
There's a rumor that there will be a live showing of Mormonism Live that weekend.
Is that a faith promoting rumor?
It's definitely got some more legs than the ones we just shared. So,
well,
I don't know how faith promoting it will be, but it'll be a lot of fun.
A live showing of Mormonism Live. This is in February 2026, and Mormonish is speaking Sunday morning. I'm so nervous, but yeah, so please come.
Are you already nervous?
I'm already nervous.
What
Nobody
are you
knows
talk
this.
about?
I already have my my talk prepared, but yeah, I'm
no
nervous.
way. You don't.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's October.
I have space in it to add a few more things that may happen between now and then, but we'll see.
This is 4 months away, Rebecca.
Well, you know what? Who knows what you forget that I am involved in tax season, and February is right in the middle of tax season, so I have to do things ahead of time. So
you really
anyway,
do. I'll be working on mine on the plane.
It's going to be fantastic. Okay, and then as far as what Mormonish has coming up tomorrow night, I am super excited and proud about this. You didn't know we did this, did you, RFM? Bill and I went behind your back and taped an amazing episode of Mormonish. It's going to air tomorrow night, Tuesday at 6 p.m. with Teresa, who, by the way, is incredible. We had just a really, really awesome discussion about religious trauma and recovery. And that's going to be a Mormonish episode tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
Wow.
Yeah,
did you talk about me? Was
we
the
did
subject
whole
abnormal
time.
psychology?
Whole time. That was it. Yeah, we tried to diagnose you. We couldn't. Yeah, we just left that alone.
Well, thank you.
Well, there's that. RFM, you had an episode come out that's up around 20,000 views already. What do you want to say about this?
I do, which I attribute to Julie Hanks, Dr. Hanks, completely. This fantastic thumbnail that you taught me how to make, Bill.
There's a little bit that goes to Jacob Hansen, right? A little bit of credit to Jacob Hansen.
Okay. I think people like to watch Jacob Hansen get dunked on. You know, I think it's a natural human reaction. If you put him in the carnival on the midway, that seat you sit on and people throw the baseballs to try and hit the target to dunk him.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. He would make so much money. That is actually, I think, that is the career that God has intended for him, because he would be a millionaire in a year's time. Everybody would want to pay their money to dunk Jacob Hansen. If you put a few sharks in there, you'd make even more money. Just a little more risky is all. Yeah, we have a lot of fun on this show. And I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. And I'll tell you, Julie Hanks, she comes across looking happy. She comes across looking healthy as compared to Jacob Hansen and Rachel Patterson, who are complaining about her all over the place and how she's not happy. And we're the ones who are happy and she's not happy. Oh, no, we're happy. Yeah, it's crazy.
One of them has the Mormon countenance and the other one doesn't. And I
know.
Ironically.
And Julie managed to flip the script on him.
It's pretty easy to see. All right. Just talking about me and Teresa. This went out this past Sunday morning. Holy boundaries or holy control. We talk about unhealthy religious systems and systems in general, and also mentioned about personal relationships with just another person and family systems, for instance, or a parent or a child. But we talked about what it means to have healthy boundaries, how unhealthy boundaries affect people, and what it takes to establish boundaries in your life when you haven't done so before. Because I think for a lot of people coming out of Mormonism, that is a whole new skill set that they've never been able to utilize up till now. And part of moving into the second half of life is to realize that you have a right to your own safety and you have a right to boundaries that you need for you. And so we go into that in big detail. So Holy Boundaries or Holy Control, the Almost Awakened podcast. And then Mormonism After Dark Friday night.
Yay. Ooh. Just looking at that slide makes me happy.
Look at that. I think we've been having a lot of fun lately, and I really enjoy doing the show, and I know you do. So, folks, if you're missing it, you might be missing the most laughs you could have during the course of a week. So,
wow.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks them.
It is. It's a lot of fun, though. We have a great time.
Well, that is it, folks. This is the Mormon Newscast. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. The donation links are in the YouTube description. So if you go down below, they are down there. We'd love it if you donated $5 or $10 a month to the Mormonish donation link and the Mormon discussion link. So folks, if you'll do that, that'd be great. And please hit the bell so you get notifications. And we really appreciate coming to you every week to bring you the news that is happening in the Wasatch Front, in Mormonism, each and every week. And we'll see you again next Monday at 6 p.m. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.